Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to session 2 of part 2, the management of safeguarding. Paragraph 141 has been added to introduce low-level concerns about staff and how they should be dealt with. It actually directs the readers to section 2 of part 4 of the document, which talks about allegations. So inshallah, we will discuss this in more detail in a separate session. Paragraph 143 has been added to reinforce the need to consider referring teachers to the Secretary of State via the TRA if they've been dismissed or there's been concern about their serious misconduct. Paragraph 145, further additions have been made to the expectation of what the governing bodies and proprietors should ensure that the child protection policy includes, but we've covered that earlier on in the session. Paragraph 155 and 156, they're new paragraphs and they've been added in relation to the hiring or renting out of school premises and facilities to other organisations.
So just if I can come in here, Khadija, I think schools, most of our schools hire out their premises in the evening. And it's quite important that schools are aware that there is now a responsibility upon them to ensure that those that are hiring out your premises or facilities are able to demonstrate that they have sufficient child protection arrangements. So it's really important that that you are aware of who's using your facilities, what they are using it for, and that that children are being safeguarded if children are using those facilities. So I would ask you to pay particular attention to paragraph 155 and 156, and that you can demonstrate that children are safeguarded. So take some time to read these two paragraphs, make sure that your governors, your trustees and proprietors are absolutely clear what their responsibilities are, because as I've already mentioned, we often use our facilities to hire out or rent out to other organisations, or there is maktab classes or supplementary classes that are running. The same safeguarding responsibilities are expected if there are children. So it's important that you pay particular attention to these paragraphs. I think, Khadija, if we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to reinforce what we've said at the beginning of session 1, and that is that there is greater responsibility on the governing body and the proprietor within your organisations to ensure that you have the right and appropriate safeguarding arrangements in place. And Khadija has written there, including inspecting these as needed. How are you able to demonstrate, how are governors and proprietors able to demonstrate that they are absolutely certain and confident that the safeguarding arrangements that you have in your school setting are right for the school, are effective for the school? And so it's really important that you are checking these where you have an agreement between yourselves and another organisation as well, so that you can be certain that where there are children, that they are being kept safe.
Paragraph 164, a new paragraph about the risks associated with children persistently missing education. So this paragraph has been added and it talks about why the risk is associated with children missing education, because when children are not attending school regularly, they are more risk of being exposed to certain exploitations, sexual abuse, etc. And therefore, there's been greater reinforcement on the risks associated with children missing education. So therefore, schools need to ensure that their procedures and processes are in place, and how they would deal with children missing education, and how they would liaise regularly with the local authorities as well.
Can I just say here, Khadija, that I was in a school just last week, and I reviewed their attendance patterns and found that there were a number of children that were persistently coming to school late. And I asked the question, about what the school had done to ensure that those children were coming to school late because of genuine reasons, and that the school had taken steps to minimize the number of lates that these children were having. And the school wasn't able to give me the information that I requested. And that actually would lead to a grade 4 judgment, because you are unclear as a school why those children are missing school, why they are being regularly late, and actually whether they are at risk of being criminally exploited. So, for example, if children are being exploited through county lines, or they are having to do certain drop-offs or other things, is it happening in the morning? Is that when it's happening? And is that why children are being late? How do you know? Have you had conversations with parents to ensure that you are improving their punctuality to school? So that's a kind of example that I want to reiterate would tell me that you as a school do not have strong enough procedures to ensure that children are not persistently missing education. And so the fact that we have this new paragraph where there is a clear approach to children missing education, and that could be because of they are being exploited, or they are at risk, means that schools have to make sure that they have strong procedures in place to address those punctuality issues or attendance issues. Now, I've talked about punctuality because often schools will talk to me about attendance patterns or absences, not referring to the fact that punctuality plays as significant a role in ensuring that children are not missing education. And of course, that was strengthened in the Education Inspection Framework when we received the revised guidance back in 2019. So it's really important that you pay particular attention to this paragraph, that you evaluate your current procedures. You're looking at attendance and how you as a school are addressing absences, regular absences, and the same applies for punctuality as well, because it certainly would be deemed as a safeguarding issue if the school was not doing that. And I shared this with the school when I visited them last week, that I personally would grade the school a grade 4 judgment, because the school certainly didn't have enough evidence about why children were being late, and there were not enough conversations being held with parents, and that school did not know for certain why those children were being late. So certainly something to visit if your procedures aren't strong enough currently.
Okay, paragraph 165 and 168, they're new paragraphs, and it's about elective home education and what the requirements on schools are when a child is now taken off roll on the basis that they will be educated at home.
So where a parent has expressed their intention to remove a child from school, that normally would come to you either in a telephone call, or it would come through to you in a letter or an email to inform you that a pupil was being removed from school roll and was going to be educated at home. This paragraph informs schools that you now need to try to hold a meeting with parents where it's possible to discuss why the parent is making this decision, whether they've got the facilities in place to ensure that child receives a good standard of education at home. So it's certainly recommended in this paragraph. It tells us that your local authority, you as a school, and maybe if there are other professionals involved, work together to hold a meeting with those parents so that you are clear about the next steps for that child. Because certainly there's been a significant increase in the number of children that are being educated at home. And because of that, we are seeing the changes. And we can expect to see many more. So there is some work going on at the moment, and we can expect to see some further guidance on this, but it's certainly been included in the new guidance. And so and here on the next slide, it's before that final decision is made. So if a parent is telling you, this is what we're thinking, then come and have a chat with us, parents, and let's see, you know, what you're going to be doing and how perhaps we can support. And as it says there, to ensure the parents have considered what is in the best interests of the child. So is it right for them? Is that child going to be sufficiently supported at home? And it goes on in the guidance to say that this is really important where a child is classed as being vulnerable, has a social worker, or has special educational needs and disabilities. Now, we've discussed this before, that a child who is vulnerable can have all sorts of issues. And there can be all sorts of reasons why you've put them on a vulnerable register. So it's really important that you are clear about whether further work is needed and what you've done to ensure that the right support is being put in place. And Khadijah's mentioned already a number of times that through part 1 and part 2 that we need to be updating a number of policies because of the changes to keeping children safe. So we've talked about our behaviour policy. Obviously, child protection policy will have significant revision amendments to it. But also, the guidance tells schools that you must update your admissions policy to reflect this recommendation. So you will have a separate paragraph now, titled maybe elective home education or whatever it is that you want to call it, but that you will make mention of what we have discussed in the last few slides, that the school will hold a meeting with parents before a final decision is made, that would be to ensure that the child's best interests are addressed, that you will pay particular attention to pupils in your school whose parents are thinking about homeschooling if they sit on a vulnerable register or a SEN register. So it's really important that you add this to your list of actions that are needed now because of the changes to this revised guidance.
Okay, paragraph 172 and 175 is just additional information about DFE's program to help schools with preventing and tackling bullying and mental health and behaviour in schools. I'd just like to add that from September, schools will be able to access mental health trainings provided by the government. So that would be something that we can share with you in September. The other thing that is mentioned here within the document is that there is no mandatory requirement that there should be in school a senior mental health lead. There is a requirement that there is a mental health lead, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a senior mental health lead. But what the expectation is that the mental health lead is part of the SLT or is supported by members of the SLT. So that's something important that you need to consider, that though you don't need to have a senior mental health lead, whoever your mental health lead is should be part of the SLT, senior leadership team, or should be supported by someone from the senior leadership team.
Can I just say on that point, Khadija, that how are you going to demonstrate that? So are you going to be holding regular meetings with your mental health lead? Who's going to do that? Is that going to be the DSL? Is it going to be a member of the senior leadership team, i.e. the head, deputy, associate heads or assistant heads, if you have them in your school? How are you going to demonstrate that? Because you could argue with inspectors that we have a mental health lead in our school, we have a named mental health lead, but how are you going to ensure that you are meeting the requirements of particularly paragraph 173, where it's absolutely clear that they must be supported by senior members of staff? So it's something to consider moving forward. Are you going to add that to your calendar? Are you going to add that to weekly senior leadership meetings? Are you going to ensure that those mental health leads have access to training and development, what is it that you are going to be able to show? So again, something to add on to your list of actions, because brothers and sisters, it's quite clear from a number of schools that I've visited recently that this isn't a priority, that we have someone that listens to children when they're feeling down or organises some support in school. But given what children have faced, particularly over the last 18 months, given the mental health issues that our young people are now facing, given the fact that last academic year we had a document that brought us to greater attention of mental health and how it affects young people. And that's now been strengthened further in the guidance for September 2021. Makes it clear that schools must give due regard to supporting children with mental health in school. And those that you have given that responsibility to within the school need to be supported to do that role effectively, need to be trained to do that role effectively. And so it really requires you to have some thought and consideration. And as I've mentioned, in some of the schools that I visited recently, it doesn't look to me like it's a priority. There hasn't been training for staff who hold that responsibility. There isn't records of meetings that have taken place. And the fact that we now have this paragraph which talks about the support expected from you as senior leaders to mental health leads means that you're going to have to give this some careful thought and attention. Thank you, Khadija.
Paragraph 185 to 187, this section relates to children with SEND and how now it includes children with certain health issues as well. So like we've mentioned earlier on in the session, that there is a requirement on governors and proprietors to ensure that the child protection policy reflects the additional risks these cohorts may face and how they will address the challenges this presents. So your child protection policy has to be quite clear and reflect the challenges that these children can face and state the additional barriers that can exist when recognising abuse and neglect in this group of children. So some of these barriers that can exist can include to assume the indicators of possible abuse, such as behaviours, moods, injury to relate to the child's condition without further exploration, is sometimes, you know, if a child is quite reserved and quiet anyway, staff won't think much of it. They won't explore beyond that to say, well, why is this particular child so reserved? They'll be like, well, he's normal. It's normal for him to be quite quiet and reserved. That's his personality. Or because he, you know, he has a lot of anxiety, he doesn't really speak much. But that's where they can slip through the net. And that is why it's important that we overcome these barriers and we have processes and procedures in place that we can explore further and staff explore further and find out the cause of the issue and whether that child there is any safeguarding issues or any concerns relating to that particular child or that particular group of children. They are more prone to peer-on-peer isolation or bullying, including prejudice-based bullying, than other children. So in comparison to other children, children with particular health issues or special educational needs are more prone to being isolated or experience bullying from others.
So can I just say here, Khadija, that school inspectors may ask schools, how do you know that bullying is not happening in your school? And you could put forward a questionnaire or discussion groups that form teachers have with their classes on a regular basis. But as we've reiterated quite a number of times in the video so far, one size doesn't fit all. So our children who sit on a SEN register or have physical or health issues likely to give you the information that you request from them through the same channel? And is there another way in which you can gain that information? So perhaps you might want to look at having a separate session with those particular children and asking them about their experiences at school. And often we hear the question from inspectors where they ask children, what is it like to be a pupil of this school? They are going to be very aware that you have a range of children in your school setting. That question is not just going to be asked to particular pupils, it will be asked to a range of pupils. Children perhaps who have physical or health issues, children perhaps who sit on the vulnerable register or the SEN register, as well as children who don't have those difficulties. And they will want to gain information from a range of pupils. And if that's something that they do, isn't that not something that you should do as school leaders, that you should ensure on a regular basis that you are speaking to this group of children and asking them about their experiences, asking them about how they're feeling, and ensuring that they are feeling safe within the school setting. So it's really important that we have talked about this already, that there needs to be a separate section in your child protection policy about catering for children with special educational needs. But certainly it needs to go much further than that, and ensure that you as leaders are clear that children are safe, and children are happy, and that children are able to share any concerns, whatever section of the community they are coming from. Khadija?
I think you've covered the main point there, that obviously communication barriers and difficulties in managing or reporting these challenges. So children with special educational needs or particular health issues, what is the school going to do to manage those barriers? So like Hasina said, to have regular checks with those children to see if everything is okay, they're settling in okay. But I would also add that have a record, keep evidence of those sessions. So if you have a pastoral session with your group of SEN children weekly, and particular pupils with health conditions, if you have weekly pastoral sessions just to check that everything is okay, if there's anything they would like to discuss, keep a record of that, because that would be your evidence to show that you have been doing regular checks with these children, and you have been providing regular support, and you're not just waiting for a concern to arise before that support is provided. So
I think, Khadija, just to say there as well, that what you've said about recording, again, it's really important that you are holding this evidence, and that it's been held securely. Again, that you are able to show that you are having conversations with particular children, you are recording the feedback that you receive, that you are able to demonstrate what actions you may have taken as a result of that conversation. Just as you would do if you were recording a bullying incident. So you would be taking statements from different children, you will be summarising the incident, you would be reflecting on what's happened and what's going to happen next. And so you would be keeping very clear records. In the same way, it's important that you're keeping very clear records of conversations that you're having with children, the outcomes of those conversations, the next steps that you plan, and perhaps also the result of those actions. So how has it impacted children positively because of what you've done? And I think that this is something that myself and Khadija find quite often when we are visiting schools, that the recording and collating of evidence is often quite weak. And so certainly an opportunity has arisen because of the number of changes that we can see from keeping children safe so far, that we are ensuring that our processes are really robust, even where you have those processes in place. Thank you, Khadija. So we've come to the end of the session, mashallah. So that's the completion of part 2, and we will see you back inshallah for part 3. Assalamu alaikum.